Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of Gerrard, Evolution of a Revolution. It's David here in the chair as always, and as always with a consistency of selection that bodes well for title challenges. It's Stevie Clifford. Hello Stephen.
Hi David. Really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too, mate. Last week we did, of course, Steven Gerrard's first year, 2018-19, when he, I think, showed promise. The season ended without a trophy, which was disappointing. I had in my head, and I was thinking about this reading some of the comments from the listeners last week, Stevie, that I'd had in my head that initially the league might be a wee bit too far for us, but we would be a good cup team. I think it's probably fair to say that the one thing over the course of these seasons that we'll be discussing is that hasn't really come to the fore yet, but perhaps the area that, if you like, makes up for that is Europe. What do you think are the differences, the elements that's required to be successful in a knockout cup competition as opposed to the consistency that's required to do well in a league or even a group stage of Europe?
It's an interesting question because I would have agreed with you. I would have thought that it would have been easier to build a team that could win one-off matches instead of being a team that's consistently went through a season. I just think that there's been a host of things that have happened at the time that we've had the cup games. Suspensions in year one, as we discussed last week, particularly with Alfredo Morelos. Year two, which we're going to discuss, we were extremely unlucky. And then again, suspensions and other things hurt us for that one. This year's been a real disappointment, and I can't put my finger on why we've not managed to do that, because we were basically given free runs. And I would have thought that this year would have been best placed, but I think the pressure is a wee bit on us next season actually to do well in the cups. But the league is always a priority. But it is a mystifying question in terms of how can we be. How could we have been so consistent and invincible in the league this term, but failed so badly in the cup? So I don't have an answer to it. I really don't. I don't think it's attitude and things. I think just in terms of we've been unlucky, but we definitely should have been better. I would say that out of the kind of 6 cups that we went for out with the league domestically, I think that we're entitled to think that we should maybe at least have had 3, or it's certainly we've put ourselves in the position to have 3, and that's not disrespectful to anyone. When you reach a cup final and when you have a run at it like we should have had this year, I think we've got to be doing better. But the $1 million question, David, I don't know, maybe you've got an idea, but I certainly don't have an idea of why we've managed not to put a cup up yet.
No, not only have we not, of course, won one, we haven't really came close except once in 6 attempts, and I think that is probably the bigger issue. And it's a strange one. I think that we were all influenced by Gerrard, the player, and what we thought he might be like as a manager, and therefore when he arrived, I think that we remembered that swashbuckling cup-winning captain, and perhaps there were some concerns that bled into does he have what it takes to win a title, to win a league, because obviously he didn't do it as a player. And I think that was unfair, but natural, if that makes sense. I think that it's understandable because we didn't have a track record of his to go on, so we're going to look at, for evidence, what we know. And what we knew was Steven Gerrard, the player, which is what this show's about. It's about the evolution of him from arriving as, I think, still somebody that wasn't quite divorced from his career as a player yet, even though he'd gone into youth coaching. I think that we saw him, and we talked about this with his interviews last week on the show, that sometimes it seemed a wee bit to me more like a disappointed captain than a manager. And that is something that I think has absolutely, definitely changed in the time that he's been in the hot seat. But yeah, on this season, for example, as you said, I saw an interview with Borna Barisic, and he said, Philip Helander, but Borna Barisic actually said something similar, but the interview was with Philip Helander, and they said, great season, really consistent, played great football, good in Europe. We were disappointed in the Cups, and I don't know why. because it was just so out of character for everything else we saw this season. You could argue, and I would probably agree, that our two worst performances of this season came in two cup ties, and we'll need to figure out why. But that's for next week. Right now, we're going to go back to the summer of 2019. Now, this is an interesting season because obviously it wasn't completed. We only got 3/4 of it in the can before it came, but we'll come to that. First things first, Stephen, the transfer dealings that summer. My feeling on it was pretty happy with the defence. Think that, you're always looking at quality in midfield, but what I thought we desperately needed was the type of player who could make something happen, a match-changing player. I felt that the season before there had been so many draws when we should have got something, or narrow defeats where we just didn't turn our possession into opportunities, never mind into goals. And I thought that was the key. And if you look at the players who arrived, Ryan Kent eventually arrives, Joe Aribo was another big one. But even attempts with players like, I would argue, Jordan Jones, Brandon Barker, Greg Stewart, that he was trying to find a little extra in that final third.
Yeah, absolutely. If you factor in Jake Hasty as well, Greg Stewart, in terms of, I think he most likely shared the same feelings that we did, that we were just a tad short of that missing link. That's something, that extra spark, because as we spoke about last week, if memory serves me correct, there was 9 draws in his first season in the league, and I think 6 defeats, 23 victories. So if we're wanting to turn those draws, because it was a 9-point gap, I think, that we eventually lost the league on, and that was maybe a wee bit kind, because they had won it to the point where the last 6 or 7 games we won, apart from the last game, and they maybe took their foot off it. So if we're looking at it in terms of turning these draws into victories, it was what we had. But I think at the time, if you look at it, we've done good business. Joe Aribo and Ryan Kent would turn into be superstars this year, but it's just we've had to kind of wait for them to hit that consistent peak, and I still think there's more to come. In terms of the ones he brought in, I was like you. I mean, the big transfers were the arrival of Philip Hollander, Ryan Kent, Joe Aribo, and then the rest was I don't think it. Stephen Davis and Jermaine Defoe obviously came full time, but I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but it was more squad padding that we hadn't had before. There was a lot of boys went out again, and these boys would make up the nucleus, and you were hoping that they would push on.
I thought an interesting change that summer was the decision to sell Daniel Candeias. Now, Steven Gerrard wasn't chasing him out the door, but he left him out of an early Euro squad. Candeias was playing really well. Do you remember that friendly against, I think it was Marseille? And he was absolutely, he was absolutely brilliant. But he left him out of an early Euro squad. I don't think it was particularly because he was never going to get a game in Europe. I think it was he wanted to have a look at Shea Ojo, of course, was another one who arrived. I think he wanted to have a look at some of the guys he'd brought in. But I think Candeias did look around. We did seem to sign a lot of wide players. So I think Candeias looked around and thought, hang on, got a good offer from Turkey, which he did. Spoke to the manager, and the manager said, I'd like you to stay, but no, I can't guarantee that you'll start every week. And Candeias said, well, and I admire this, Stevie. I like a guy who said, well, I want to play. I think it's far too easy for modern footballers to just sit and pick up money. I like a guy who's, I want to go and play, and he did, and he has. But when asked about it, Gerrard said, we don't get enough from that area, because, the previous season, Candeias had 5 goals, 5 assists, and Gerrard's view was, for all the other things he brings, is that isn't enough for what we need to win things. And if you compare it to this season, when we have been successful, the stats are just, they're non, they can't sit side by side. But I think that looking back was quite a significant passing of the torch transfer, with the manager saying, we've moved on of stage one, which is, right, we need to work hard and not be a joke and make sure that we're competitive. But then it was, right, now we need quality. And although it would take us another year really to get that quality in embedded in, I think that was a significant, looking back, quite a significant transfer.
Yeah, it definitely was. And the funny thing is, the Marseille game you mentioned, obviously he scored two that day in a comprehensive victory, a really good performance, and everybody was saying how well he looked.
He was brilliant. He was the best player in the park.
Yeah, there was a goal. Ryan Jack played it over the top, and he ran onto it one touch and finished lovely. And we were all hoping for big things. And exactly a week later, David, he was gone. So that did come as a bit of a surprise. I don't think there was. I would say this, and I even say it now. I don't think the money that we got in terms for Daniel Candeias was enough for what we lost, if that makes sense. So, he's 700,000. It wasn't as much as we lost from the team. He still could have been a really important player throughout. And I think you're right. I think in terms of, maybe not initially because Shea Ojo started so well and so strongly, but as the season progressed and as we got to the nitty gritty and after the the winter shutdown and things, I think Daniel Candeias would have played a lot of football, especially Europe and things as well, because he was always going to be there and thereabouts. But I think that, like you, I admire the fact that he did make the move and he wanted permanent football, but I can't help but think this is a wee bit like the Josh Windass situation, but a year later in terms of they've made the decision too rashly and too quickly. I still think Daniel Candeias would be an important part of the team throughout the season, but he's gone. I don't think that, and this is hindsight as well, because obviously we've seen how it's unfolded and things, and obviously Jake Hastie hasn't worked out. Jordan Jones hasn't really grasped his opportunity. Brandon Barker isn't good enough. That's not mean to be disrespectful to these boys, but I still think if Daniel Candeias had stuck in a wee bit more, and it's not a criticism of him, he went first team football, it's not a criticism, but what I'm trying to say is I think he still would have been there or thereabouts for that team, no problem at all.
I think he'd have played that year, but I think it would have been more due to the fact that the other guys, as you say, didn't quite grasp their chance. I just don't think Candeias was good enough to take us where we needed to go. I think if you look at his career, hard working, very much so, but I think that we did need to move to a position where we had attackers who could do that. Who, if you look at, for example, the difference between someone like Candeias and Yanis Hadji, you'll see Candeias a lot more in a match. He'll be involved a lot more in a match, and you'll get to the end of the season, and Hadji's, as he's proved this year, has been involved in 4 or 5 times as many goals, and that's the difference. That's that level of quality that we needed, but. That was a good bit away. Start off early in July with St Joseph's in Gibraltar. We head out there, beat St Joseph's 4-0, then beat them 6-0 at Ibrox. Pretty straightforward victory. Then our old friends, in inverted commas, Progrès Niederkorn, who are no jokes. As bad a result as that is, you shouldn't go out to a Luxembourg side. They're very hard-working, very well organised. Rangers beat them 2-0 at Ibrox and then draw 0-0 away, which felt like a notable enough result, not because beating a Luxembourg side is anything huge, just because of, if you wanted a sort of bookend of how different we were from the Pedro era, then there's a brilliant example of that, I think. And then our first league game of the season, we're away to Rugby Park. Now, tough game against Kelly, and we've been there before, and Rangers play, I think, reasonably well. It's a tight game against Kilmarnock. They've a new manager in, but it's still essentially the Steve Clarke side. Rangers take the lead, but then we begin to see a lot of what we saw before, which is in the second half, Rangers haven't put Kilmarnock away, a goal up. And I remember sitting watching this game. I wasn't at the game, I was watching it on TV, and I remember chatting to people, on various places, on social media, and we're all sitting going, they're going to score, they're going to score, they're going to score. And with 7 minutes to go, they score. Bad goal from a Rangers point of view. And the utter rage that I felt, that you felt, everybody felt, that here we go again, same old stuff, nothing's been learned, etc., etc. But the script is flipped somewhat with, in the last minute, Rangers get a corner, Connor Goldson is there, heads it home, and Rangers pick up the 3 points. That was a game that I felt signalled a bit of a turn, and as it turned out, it was a bit of a false dawn. But at that point, that was a big result.
Yeah, it definitely was. Like you say, the thing that was so disappointing about not only the way that game panned out and the same old frustrations, but the goal we lost was the exact same. The free kick where nobody dominates, it goes to the back post, he's allowed time for it to bounce and then kind of places it high into the roof of the net. And I, like you at that point, was really frustrated. Here we go again. But it flipped, like you said, because everybody took a lot out of that. We all said, right, this is a great indication of they have learned their lesson. It shows you the fine margins in football, because if Goldson hadn't made that header, then we would all have, basically been down in the dumps and over-exaggerated, league's over, first week, etc., etc. We've been there before. But because we didn't, because we managed to win, we flipped it, and it was all a case of, well, they have learned their lessons, we can now kick on. But definitely, it was a close one. Opening games of the season always are, especially at Rugby Park. So it was a case of, it was a good 3 points and on we go. But I don't remember thinking at the time that I was worried overly. I was trying to be really positive and perhaps see past any. I didn't see any warning signs on the day, David, if that makes sense, as if to say this should be noted as being too close or warning signs in terms of goals we had lost. I didn't feel that way. I wanted to be positive in terms of, well, now we can kick on and really go into the season, because merged with obviously the Europa League, we had a fairly decent pre-season in terms of friendlies and things. So at that point, I thought that everything was going okay.
It certainly was, and we then take on a very tough-looking European tie. We play Midtjylland of Denmark. Danish side had been in the Champions League qualifiers. Very, very good team. Great home record, and it looks a really, Danish football is a good standard at the top end of it, and you thought, oh, this will be a good game. And Rangers are brilliant. Rangers are absolutely sensational. Led, it has to be said, by, I think, a surprise inclusion that night, Jordan Jones. I don't think we expected him to play, and he was terrific. Absolutely tore them apart. Rangers race into a 3-0 lead, and you're thinking, my goodness, Midtjylland get 2 back, and even so, you're in a good position, but Rangers add a 4th to pretty much kill the tie. And given the return leg at Ibrox, Rangers win 3-1 really comfortably. I think that the 4th goal over there really knocked the stuffing out of them. 7-3 aggregate win that's really not in doubt for large spells of the tie. A terrific performance, Stephen. And then we take on Legia Warsaw, and this is, I think, from our point of view of the evolution of Gerrard the manager, this is, I think, tactically one of the best triumphs of the team, because, you have to include Michael Beale in that. We go over to Warsaw, draw 0-0. Very tight, very, very tight match. Good side, Legia Warsaw. Back to Ibrox, same again. And then, of course, with mere seconds remaining, up pops Alfredo Morelos from a Jordan Jones cross, actually. Heads it home. I believe the word the youngsters use, Stephen, is scenes. Places going absolutely barmy. We're in the Europa League. Of course, the money then allows us to go and buy Ryan Kent on Casper Kent Day, the last day of the window. But these are 2, I think, underrated ties, because these are good sides. There's a lot on the line, and Rangers come through 2 different but 2 huge tests and get back into the Europa League for the 2nd year in a row.
Yeah, Midtjylland was really a fantastic indication of how far we came in Europe, because this was a tie that undoubtedly years before we would have struggled, undoubtedly probably wouldn't have progressed, David. And even if you go even further back, we've discussed this before, in times of, Walter Smith, Alex McLeish, where we had better sides, even, these periods where we were strong, we're winning domestic trebles and things like that, we didn't progress in Europe against teams like this as easily as we did that night, to beat Midtjylland 4-2 away, like you say, Jordan Jones, that counter-attacking goal where he feeds Aribo, the first proper sign of Joe Aribo, I think, as well, that this boy can finish and he's got skills at home. Again, very, very routine. We're making these ties look routine. Everything's going well, but I think everybody knew that Legia was a step up, but that was a night.
Aye.
And I don't know if you remember that at home, the fans played a huge part on this because around 80 odd minutes, the Legia fans done a pyro display, some of which then made it onto the pitch and the smoke covered the pitch. Well, that galvanised our fans with 10 minutes or so left, and it was a real proper European atmosphere with a couple of minutes left. And I've no doubts, David, that drove us on and really kicked us on. But the scenes, as you say, euphoric scenes, when that goal goes in, that header, and it's bedlam, proper European nights again at Ibrox, and we're back and we're through, and like you say, that did allow us to kick on and get Ryan Kent. I think that if we don't win that night, we don't pay the money for him, and history could have been so much different. So a vital moment, a huge game, and like you say, we were very tactically astute. I don't remember. And I've kind of looked back over reports because I knew we would talk about the significance of this. They didn't actually create that much against us at all.
They didn't.
There was a chance in the first game. Jerzy, I think, had an effort, which we dealt with okay. Aside of that, we were very, very solid, tactically very good, defensively very strong, and it was a great result.
Rangers' league campaign starts off pretty solidly. Our first home match sees a 6-1 victory over Hibs. Of course, no one remembers anything to do with Rangers that day because Scott Allen's pass was, I'm sure anyone remembers. But we then beat St Mirren 1-0, which I think is a big result in the career of a certain Rangers player, Borna Barisic, who has started the season well enough. And there's a couple of things I think that do this for him. Firstly, that free kick, and that's the moment everybody picks out. I'd like to chuck another one into the mix.
The Feyenoord goal.
Yes. Spot on. He is up the Borna that we now know, and that we saw for Osijek against us, but we hadn't really seen in his time at Rangers. And there's Borna up the field, thundering into a tackle, winning the tackle, and it's a tremendous finish by Shea Ojo, an absolute peach. But Borna Barisic begins to show why we bought him, and of course has never looked back, just has not looked back, and is now the Croatian national team left back going into Euros for the World Cup finalists at the last World Cup. So I think, don't take our word for it, I suppose is what I'm saying there. But yes. And then, Stevie, Legia Warsaw, we're all in a high. On the Sunday, Rangers welcome Celtic to Ibrox, and the feeling among the support was incredibly confident. Rangers were playing well, and we were at home, full house at Ibrox, beautiful sunny day in September, perfect conditions for football. Stupid early Sunday kick-off, 12 o'clock, but I remember going up to the game with two of the podders, Martin and Marina, from Co-Winning, and we got up there, parked, all in a good mood, walking down to the stadium. I was sitting that day with Hoggy and his daughter in the enclosure, and we all meet up outside Ibrox, and I swear to goodness, and I've spoken to other Rangers fans who were there that day, that I'm not
going to say here.
I know that I'm not imagining it. We're all standing there checking the phone for the team. The team comes out. I remember it so clearly, standing outside this beautiful day at Ibrox with all my friends, thousands of other Bears right outside the main stand, and almost simultaneously everybody, thousands of people went, ooh, he got the team badly wrong that day.
Yeah, he did. And it was significant for a couple of reasons. Not only did we get beat, the decision to start Jermaine obviously didn't work at all.
And to bench Alfredo, who was surely on a high after that last minute winner.
Yeah, it was similar. This comes similar to what we spoke about the episode before last week when he went to 3 at the back at Motherwell. I think this is the only time that he's properly dropped Alfredo for a big game in rotation with somebody else. I don't think that's happened this year. I don't think it happened again. So it very much was a lesson learned, but it definitely didn't work. And not only did it not work, David, it deflated everyone. Like you, I was, obviously at the game and things today, that day, and I was actually in the ground. I'm an early grounder, David. I like to be in, right? So it's funny because we were, obviously I've told you that the Scotland game next week were to be in by 11:30. My wife said to me, she said, see if that was Rangers, you would be delighted. You would be so happy about it. So I like to be in early, and
I'm kind of annoyed at that because I wanted you for hot mic, and then when I was doing up my hot mic team, I was going to ask you, and I thought, is it the bloody game? But never mind.
Next one, but yeah,
next one.
The same as you. See, when we were, you were outside, I was in the ground. See, everybody in the ground, it was more or less they looked at their phones, looked to the guy to the side of you, looked at their phone, looked back, and it was like, WTF, what's going on here? It took the wind out of everybody's sails, and I think that was another huge moment in terms of Steven Gerrard learning. I don't recall a time that for a huge match, certainly Celtic, etc., he's ever done that again. And I think it just highlighted how invaluable Alfredo was and important. If you didn't already know it, you certainly knew it after that game.
Can I bring this up? And this isn't really to do with the manager, something he did, but I think it ties in. The reason I bring this up as a comparison is just that it's, as we're recording, folks, this is quite a kind of timely thing. Recently, the European Cup final, which I know you were delighted to see Chelsea win, obviously, for young Billy Gilmour. But there is a suspicion and a widely held theory that Pep Guardiola has a tendency in big European matches to overthink it and to end up psyching himself out, really, by possibly trying to be too clever and by making changes and doing things that don't really need done, that end up actually weakening his team. Things like no holding midfielder against Chelsea, that just didn't work. The year before against Lyon, going to a three at the back and having two holding midfielders against Lyon, for goodness sake. There's several examples when he was at Bayern Munich in the latter stages of Champions League. I wonder if that happened to the Rangers coaching side that day, that they overthought it. And rather than... Now, I'm not saying, by the way, that coaches shouldn't be going into matches looking at the opposition and thinking about how they're going to play and, making tweaks and whatnot. But can managers in general psych themselves out and talk themselves, I suppose, into things that if they had maybe a wee bit more distance from it, they would realise, no, actually, I'm making a change here for something that doesn't need to be changed?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, see, if we look at what happened the year before, when we went to Ufa and with 9 men and everybody was, absolutely burst. And then we went to Parkhead a couple of days later, and we spoke about this last week in terms of the coaching staff admitted that we were tanks, completely empty. And we more or less, not settled, but you used a phrase where we just contained, basically. I think, similarly, we've just got through against Warsaw, where then a few days later on the Sunday against Celtic again, that maybe that's went into their psyche a wee bit too much. And it falls into what you're saying perfectly in terms of overthinking it. And also think Pep for that for the Champions League final, he's got to throw Aguero on earlier and stuff. And I agree with you, he has. In big games, he's made some strange decisions. But for this one, I think that we've maybe went with the old containment theory from last year, and we'll bring Alfredo on the last half an hour. But of course, when he comes on, it's too late. But something else happened that day, David, as well, that was hugely significant in the career of Jordan Jones at Rangers.
Good.
Because he obviously gets sent off in the last minute for a horrendous challenge and misses the next 4 months. And I think and this will sound harsh, but I think that's basically stopped his Rangers career before it's even started.
It was huge because it put a doubt in the manager's mind about whether he could trust him. And it derailed his season, because he was out for 3 months at a time when he was in good form and playing well. But it was a piss poor decision from not a kid, to go and do that. We're not impressed if you chop somebody at 2-0 down at home to Celtic. That doesn't make us think you're a tough man,
No, it doesn't.
And when you injure yourself and not him as well, then we just think you're a bit of a fool. So that's not the way we want to see Rangers players going. So I think it cast huge doubt among the support, which was such a shame because he was changing. I think a few people were a wee bit, I don't fancy him, and he had already started to demonstrate, there's ability there. But look, I think I might be wrong. He's still a Rangers player as we record. I don't think he will be for long, but I do think that at the end of Jordan Jones' career, we're going to look back on a guy who should have achieved significantly more than he will. But he'll never play for a club as big as us again, put it that way.
Agreed.
When he leaves. So some excellent form from Rangers over the next couple of months in various competitions. In the league, Rangers are very good. A couple of slip-ups. Beat Livingston 3-1, St Johnstone away 4-0, 5-0 home wins over Aberdeen and Hamilton. A 1-1 draw at Hearts, not a great performance. Rangers showing worrying things, of not really playing particularly well out there, but back on track by beating Motherwell 2-1. Philip Helander with a late goal. 4-0 at Ross County, a superb Rangers performance, Ryan Jack in particular. Beating Livingston 2-0 away, always a good victory. 3-1 away to Hamilton, 5-0 at home to Hearts. And then a very peculiar league performance. We are playing Aberdeen at Pittodrie. Rangers race into a 2-0 lead inside half an hour and are superb. At that point, it's how many? Aberdeen get a goal back and Rangers completely stop. And in the second half, Aberdeen get an equaliser. Rangers should have a penalty. Unfortunately, John Beaton is the referee and therefore don't get it, obviously.
Gives a free kick instead, doesn't he?
Gives a free kick on the edge of the box. But it's all right, he phoned and apologised later. Aye. But even so, we're Rangers, and although we do get screwed by the referee on this occasion, that game, how Aberdeen come out of it with a point, the game should have been put to bed inside 30 minutes. But at 2-0 up, playing the way we're playing, you can't come out of there with a point. And this season's team could have been playing far worse and still won.
Yeah, it was a particularly difficult night as well because we're flying at that point, and I think if I remember correctly, we're really within touching distance of them. It was a case of, if they drop points, we're going to go up top and things like that. And this was just before the League Cup final as well. So it was a difficult few days for us. But you go 2-0 up anywhere on 30 minutes and don't win, it's really disappointing. But that was a sign of things to come in terms of we weren't able to... We still hadn't got that out of our system, David, that when we had a setback, we couldn't recover. And this was a clear sign of that, definitely. A really disappointing night as well. To lose a goals, that's something else that happened. They score in 40 and 48. To lose 2 goals as quickly as that from a position of being so solid and so in command, I don't think that happens now.
No, I don't either.
This season in the league, I think only Hibs scored more than 1 against us. Off the top of my head, I think that's correct. I think the 2-2 away was the only time. So it shows you that we have obviously learned, but at that point in the evolution of the team and things, we definitely haven't. So a body blow, definitely.
Yep, it really was. And Stevie mentioned there the League Cup progress, and that has been pretty smooth, ending up with a 1-0 victory away to Livy. Glenn Kamara, the goal, tough tie, but we get through it. Welcome to Scotland for Joe Aribo, unfortunately, as he's headbutted by Declan Gallagher, and he tough, in terms of toughening up, Joe Aribo has, but there are certain things they shouldn't have to put up with, but still, it's Scotland. Anyway, yes, beat Hearts 3-0 in the League Cup semi, very comfortable, and to the final. Rangers versus Celtic at Hampden. Ticket scramble ahoy. This is the second lowest point for me in the Gerrard reign. And the reason I say that is that Rangers are excellent that day. Really are. absolutely dominate the game. Celtic just can't get out against us. Rangers midfield, Davis and Jack, totally dominant. Aribo's causing them all sorts of problems, and up front, Alfie is getting the better of defenders, but we can't score. We just can't get the ball in the net. Fraser Forster in goal for Celtic does have a superb match. Celtic take the lead with an offside goal. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, here we go again. But then Rangers get a penalty, and Rangers get a penalty. Celtic get a red card at the penalty as well. And here we go. Put this away, go on and win the cup. Now, James Tavernier had come off penalties after missing a few just before, and Alfredo Morelos is the designated penalty taker. Up steps Alfie, Forster saves it, and that's it. We know. I mean, I was there that day. Everybody, we knew that was it. It was done. And coming out of the ground, people my age all had the same thought, and we didn't really want to express it, but when we got together quietly, we all said it. We are Tommy Burns' Celtic. We're a good side. We play good stuff, but we just don't have a winning mentality. And that's exactly what used to happen when Walter was here, that they could play badly, their goalie would make saves, and they would find a way to get over the line. And the feeling of emptiness after that defeat was total. It was such a painful one to take.
Yeah, it was. And even now, when we're discussing it, I've got horrible feelings in my stomach. We dominated that game, battered them, lost such an appalling goal in terms of, I think not only was there one of them offside, I think three of them were offside, David. And so difficult to legislate for that, but then to kick back and the whole penalty thing, as soon as we missed that, that was another indication of what we've managed to overcome, but we hadn't at that point, was that they simply just packed the defence. I remember they were just kicking the ball away and we were taking it and coming again. McGregor was standing basically, well outside his box as a sweeper, and off we went again every time. But there was nothing, we couldn't break them down. There was no inventiveness. In fact, I don't think there was many opportunities after the red card. In terms of before it, Alfredo was dominating. He had a lot of efforts. I remember the one in the first half where he bullies a defender out on the right and then cuts in and drives in, and he's unlucky because he hits it low and hard, which he should have, but the keeper's actually done well. But in terms of bossing it and bullying, we were just overrunning them. And like you, after that game, it was really difficult to stay positive. And we've got, people say to us, David, that we've got a sense of responsibility in terms of our social media platforms and trying to not be overly negative and trying not to push an opinion on people in terms of if we think that somebody's had a bad game. People are really quick to tell us that we shouldn't, be overly negative and things like that. But I will say after that one, I really struggled to try and stay positive. And I always try and keep positive and say, look, we're getting close to them, or this is, an indicator of that we're actually, the tides are turning and things, which we can say now, looking back, it was an indicator of that. But at the time, you couldn't have picked me off the floor, I'm afraid. I was absolutely gutted. And the worst thing about it was that I go to all the games with Karen, obviously my wife, and she can normally switch quite quickly. We get into the car and I've got a face like thunder, and she's like, look, we're going to see the boys, we're going to get our kids now, so we have to snap out of it. Even she, in the car that day, didn't utter a word on the way back from Hampden. And it was a very quiet household that night. And that's when you know that there's issues, because if she's not able to snap out of it, then we're in big trouble. And that was one of those ones that really just a really gut-wrenching defeat, David.
I never told anybody this, but after the game, young James Forrest kindly agreed to give me a lift home, so that I didn't have to travel back on public transport, seeing that lot. And the daft bastard took a wrong turn at Hampden and drove us right through the Celtic supporters, who of course all clock me. Yeah, not a fun day. Aye. And I'm just sitting there in the car, and they're all running up and banging the windows, and yeah. But this is important to do now. Our European form has been good. It's been excellent, in fact. Some cracking results. We draw with Porto. We beat Porto in a magnificent Porto team. Proved it again proved it the season before, proved it the season after it. We draw over there with them. Alfie is on fire throughout this European campaign. That week, we have to pick ourselves off the floor to play young boys to get through. Alfie scores, which I think, talk about a set of swingers. And then absolutely...
celebration, sorry David, just to say celebration that night.
Oh, man. When he apologised, and it was like, oh, son. But we get through.
You can't be mad at him. You cannot.
No, he missed a penalty. It wasn't. I'll be mad at him for something later this season, but I'm not mad at him because he missed a penalty. That happens. I wish it hadn't, but it's how you get back up. And he got back up and he fires us through. And we're not through that group if it's not for Alfredo Morelos. End of story. He's looking just lethal. The goal against Porto is top. I mean, the one in Porto is great, but see the one at Ibrox? That's an astonishing goal. In terms
that was
of
a phenomenal night as well.
Oh, the atmosphere.
And
because they're a right good side.
Oh yeah, I mean
Champions League group stage. Champions League last 16, the year before and the year after. These are no mugs. I think we massively underrate that victory.
Yeah, I was about to say that's as big a victory over a top-class European team, arguably, as Parma under Advocat and things like that. Because we've kind of taken it as being slightly routine, given how good Gerrard's been. But that was a huge, huge victory. They had class all the way throughout that side. And the goal we scored out there is, I'm glad you mentioned it, because Helander strides out of defence, plays the ball. It works its way. I think it's Kent who flicks it to Barisic, and the pinpoint accuracy of the cross, the touch, and then the finish. It was just absolutely glorious. And then he's got the trademark knee slide and point down, And that was, again, another phenomenal kind of night for us away from home in Europe under Gerrard. The home game, brilliant. But as you say, that night against Young Boys, I was actually angry because we conceded such a poor goal that stopped us winning the group. And I think it didn't. I was angry at the time because you always want to see them win, and I do give the players a hard time. Even Mrs. is constantly on at me, but I was disappointed that we didn't win the group that night. But it was a huge result, and like you said, Alfredo to go through 1-on-1. Tuck it away, and then his celebration, you couldn't help but love that. But another excellent European adventure, David, so far.
Yeah, and I remember Martin saying to me at the time, because I was worried about that game, just the funereal mood that was round us all. And he said, they'll bounce back. He said, they're good at bouncing back. The problem is that there's so many occasions that they need to bounce back. And he was right. But we're now going to come to, I think, something that's important. We then, go through the games, looking ahead to the Old Firm game. A guy went on FF, follow.com for those of you who don't know, the forum, the night of the defeat against Celtic in the League Cup. The people didn't want to hear it. And he said, we'll beat them at Parkhead. We've got their number now. They don't know how to play us. They did beat us earlier in the season, but it was because they sat in and we got the team wrong. But today we've shown they can't live with us when we play that football. And of course, everybody quite rightly said, you're talking out your hole. They've beat us twice. We've not scored against them. You dick. Right? And the poor guy took an absolute pounding. And then, of course, we go to Parkhead. And this, I think, is huge. And it doesn't seem huge for very long. But now that we're where we are, we haven't lost to Celtic since. And in fact, we've only drawn once against Celtic. And we've beaten them 5 times. And that day, we beat them 2-1. A stunning goal by Ryan Kent. And then, unfortunately, poor wee Celtic fans all fainted at his celebration and missed the second half. Had they recovered in time, they would have seen their side, I think, rather expertly taken apart. Niko Katic gets the goal. Rangers get the victory. Now, there's a lot to take into this. I think we're allowed now to look back and take everything in one piece. I think we can do that. That's the point of this show. But at the time, you don't know. That boy came back on FF and went, told yous. And he was righter than anyone could imagine, as it's turned out. But it's a terrific performance. It does set the stall for future Rangers Celtic performances under Gerrard and Lennon. But what it does is it makes you think, oh, we are over that cup final defeat. We have taken it the right way. And it sets us up, we think, for the second half of the season. Now, we all know, and we're just about to discuss, why that was false. But it was, I think, the harbinger, the turning point. We hadn't won at Parkhead for, a decade. It was a huge result to go there, to the point where already now there's no fear about it. I mean, after years of us going, Parkhead, and in the back of our mind going, we know what's going to happen. Now, I'd play them at Parkhead every week, quite happily. There's absolutely no fear whatsoever about playing them. But at that time, we hadn't had a win in so long. But we go there, we win. Our special players show again. They love that atmosphere. Ryan Kent, again, sensational. But there was some complaints, and it stuck in people's mind because it's something that got even brought up in the comments of a previous show that we've done here about the celebrations afterwards, when Steven Gerrard is obviously, I think, quite overcome with emotion. His whole team is. And some people have said since they over-celebrated and that acted as a motivation for Celtic. I don't really like that argument, because to me that argument is, don't annoy them because you'll wind them up. I think you're allowed to celebrate a big victory that was a big victory. It was a huge victory, first win in 10 years, the comeback after the League Cup, all of that. There's no need to do it every single time. And we'll talk about this next week. After the next victory at Parkhead, it's just a handshaking off the pitch. But I think that don't over-celebrate, because obviously it wound them up and they went on and won the league. They won the league because of what we did. It's always about what we do. We didn't do enough. If we'd done enough, we'd have won the league, and we didn't. That's why we didn't win the league. What's your view on it? I do think that Gerrard did have in his mind the next time not to do it, but I don't think I'm going to criticise people for a human reaction.
No criticism at all. And if we talk about Rangers overreacting that day, when you look back at Celtic's 2-0 victory earlier in the season, they were all over it at their end, doing bowing, all interlinked and bowing, and Lennon was over there celebrating and getting scarf chucked at them and everything else. What Rangers did was, ran to our corner, which isn't that dissimilar. There was a lot of passion on display from Steven Gerrard because it was a monumental moment for us. And a lot of that would have been on the back of the cup final disappointment as well, David. And it would have been in their heads answering the questions and the critics that said they didn't have the balls and they didn't have the passion for it. But it's easy to say now that they may have over-celebrated, but I don't buy the argument that somehow G's up the opposition, because, as we'll discuss, and unfortunately, them winning or being defaulted the league was purely down to the fact that we collapsed. So I don't buy it. There was a lot of things in that game as well. We don't overly need to go back on it, but the referee performance that day was atrocious. Stuff like Alfredo clean through, gets taken down by Julian, and they get the free kick. He then promptly gets sent off for a stupid moment, which again has huge kind of ramifications, and that's in the back of him being sent off at Motherwell just a few weeks before. So that has ramifications which would severely affect us. But in terms of that day, you had the whole... It set us up, David, because I think we all believed at that point we would kick on, because I remember social media was jovial. It was a brilliant place. And then, of course, you had the phantom stories that Alfredo had battered Ryan Christie in the tunnel. And, social media...
Burst his testicle was the rumour the Celtic fans were, yeah.
But the reaction, obviously, on social media and the memes and the stories and things like that. And the funny thing is, a little small funny story, but I don't know if you'll remember this. I spoke to Colin about this recently, but I did a blog, and it said the headline was "The Truth About Morelos Tunnel Incident at Celtic Park," and when you clicked on it and went into it, it was just a picture of Nicola
I
Catt
remember that.
running
Yes.
away celebrating, and all it said underneath was "It didn't happen," ignore the odds, and everybody, it just. I've wrote some what I consider, David, like interviews with some massive Rangers players, and we've did stuff together, did blogs that I think are amazing, and this one got 50,000 views in something like 2 hours, and I thought to myself, for all the stuff that I've taken time to do, this has been the most popular thing I've ever done, and it's just been a picture of Nicola Katic celebrating. So it was really funny, and it sort of spread like wildfire. And it just, the mood of everybody in the camp at that point was just, we were going to kick on and we were going to do it. And little did we know that Alfredo Morelos' red card in that game would be so pivotal to what would happen in the next few weeks.
Yes, and it was now that January transfer window. There's two things to discuss. One, couple of signings I thought quite sensible signings. Firstly, Yanis Hadji, I was very excited about, as you know. Yanis Hadji is a guy I'd seen playing for Romania under 20s, famous 21s at the under 21 championship. Famous name, of course. His dad was a legend. But I remember watching him and genuinely, specifically thinking, wow, I wish we could sign this guy. And we did. He was, just superb that day. An exciting young talent, and of course the fact that if we were to sell him tomorrow, we'd quadruple our money, and that's after the important part he played last season. And people sometimes do knock Yanis Hadji, and I'm biased, so I'll hold my hands up there. Winning goal against St Johnstone, winning goal against Hibs, umpteen assists. The boy's been a good signing at £3 million, especially when you can quadruple your money on him. And the other one was Florian Kamberi, who comes in and does okay. It's kind of what he does, really. Florian Kamberi arrives at a club and does well for a couple of months and then tails off. But loan deal from Hibs, sensible enough bits of business, I thought, Stephen.
Well, first of all, like you, when they were first linked with Yanis Hadji and the names were going about and Yanis Hadji, it was a real wow moment for me, as if to say, wow, is this possible? Could we get this boy? I'm like you, I'm a massive Yanis Hadji fan, and it took me a while. Something you said resonated with me really early on, and it began to take a different perspective when I was watching him. You said to me that Yanis Hadji is a moments player, and that stuck with me. And when I allowed my sort of psyche and my mind to agree with that, it's absolutely spot on, because Yanis Hadji will drift out of games, will not be involved and then have moments. And Yanis Hadji's got something like, I think, 23 goal involvements from the season where we've just won the league, and he cost £3 million. So, as you said, this is somebody that we're going to minimum treble our investment in, minimum. I think we'll get a lot more, incidentally. But if you're looking at it on a bad day, you're looking at getting between 12 to 15 million for Yanis Hadji on a bad day. And he's just, I think he's sublime. I think the stuff he can do, the vision. And we were, at this point, David, you got to remember as well, we were crying out for somebody to do something different. And that's exactly what Yanis Hadji is. Yanis Hadji's a game changer. He's a moments player. And what you said to me is, I think, it's not, how do I say this without condescending people, but there's a lot of people that maybe look at Yanis Hadji and expect him to take on 2-3 players and score goals like Gascoigne or Laudrup used to do. He's not that type of player. He's a player that will sit and pick out those intricate passes. He will find space between the lines. And if you look at the goal involvements of him and the moments, like you said, big moments, Hibs, St Johnstone, there's been a lot of games that have been 1-0 where he's popped up and done vital passes and assists and goals as well. So, no, I'm like you, a massive signing, and bringing him in 6 months, getting him ready for the defining year this year, the championship year, was a masterstroke. So definitely good business. I'm not, and I wasn't, a Florian Kamberi fan, I'm afraid, David. Didn't like him from the word go. I didn't think he was good enough. And as it progressed and people were saying, I think we should sign him, I thought that he just looked fairly decent in a team that was in a bit of a rut. Didn't ever like the look of him. He's got a style that I just never kind of grasped. And it's no hard feelings. It's it's no bitterness or a dislike. It's just a player that I just thought wasn't good enough for us. We were at a stage where we had plenty of players like Florian Kamberi. We needed the next level up, and I just didn't think he was that. Whereas I knew and was convinced Yanis Hadji was.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair, that is a fair point. So I think that I think you're right in terms of did he stand out in a poor side? He did, and that's what we're going to talk about. Why was it a poor side he was standing out in? Well, Rangers go off to Dubai. Never go to Dubai, I think, is the rule. Yeah, I think we've learned that. There's a lot of allegations about things going on there. Now, you and I have both asked, investigated, talked to. Nothing's ever come out if anything went on there. So, I mean, have you heard any different, like, concrete?
No, I remember, and this isn't meaning to name drop.
Clang!
It's going to sound wanky, but I'm putting it out there anyway. But Michael Beale actually messaged me that night on Instagram. Now, there was not Instagram, sorry, Twitter. There was a lot of things going on at the time. There was massive stories about Alfredo, about his private life. There were stories of fighting and drinking and partying over in Dubai and everything else. And I had put out a thing, the same as you, saying, look, this is a nonsense. This isn't happening. I think that also a small point, David. See, I don't think this would happen now with this group in terms of rumours, and I think our PR is moved on, is a lot better than what it was now, because it was kind of like an empty vacuum, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, you would have been contacted immediately to say this is completely nonsense, and we could have stopped it a lot sooner. But Michael Beale actually messaged me that night and says, look, he says, mate, this is absolute nonsense. Nothing's happened. Nothing's going on. Let it be known that these things are completely false. Your connections as well. We had bottomed it out, but it didn't stop it, David. It didn't stop the rumours. It didn't stop the chatter. And of course, what happens? We have an early bad result. And as soon as that happens, we just couldn't recover, because social media was so negative. That obviously then went on to from the stands onto the pitch, and it's just so disappointing in terms of where we'd been to where it's so very quickly unravelled.
I have asked privately, and even sometimes you can ask privately and they say yes, but if I ever hear you talk about this, I'll set fire to you. And they tell you. And if that had been the case and they'd asked me not to say, I probably wouldn't say, but I wouldn't come on here and say nothing happened.
Yeah.
But I've asked privately, when people have been relaxed and drunk and happy and, we're champions, and they've all said, no, nothing happened. So either there is a law of omerta, or what I suspect it is, Stevie, is that the fall off in form was so baffling that it's human nature to go, there must be a reason for this. There must be one single reason, because at any time if we have an issue, and if we can find a reason, then we can fix it and we can make sure nothing will happen again. So it's very tempting to go, it must have been that, because then we can ensure in future that doesn't happen, and therefore this will never happen again. And of course, life is much more complex than that, much more complicated than that. And what happens is that there's a number of factors. And to this day, I think a lot of Rangers players and management don't understand what was about to happen and why it happened. We come back, we play Stranraer in the Cup, and we're really poor, in all honesty, but fair enough. Just back after 3 weeks, we win the game, so, nothing much to it. And then, wow, we play St Mirren and we beat them 1-0, and we're all right. And then we go to Tynecastle and we're bloody awful, and we lose 2-1 to Hearts. Shocking performance.
After
beat
taking the lead as well.
Oh
Again.
yeah, we are terrible, absolutely terrible that night. Then we beat Ross County, but then we play Aberdeen at home 0-0, not playing well at all. Beat Hibs at home 2-1, not playing well at all. But at least we won. But we're definitely not playing well, and people can see this. We then go to Rugby Park, which has been, a graveyard for us many times, and we take the lead. Great Scott Arfield goal, and then we throw it away. Absolutely chuck it away. End up losing 2-1. At this point, the wheels are definitely coming off. We beat Livingston 1-0 in a strange game, one that I think that people will look back on history, that was postponed on the Saturday because of weather, then played on the Sunday. We go and we play St Johnstone away in a shoddy performance. We draw 2 each. We are rubbish. Our defence is a joke that day. Both Goldson and Katic have absolute nightmares, but everybody is having nightmares at this point. And then we take on Hearts in the Cup. Alfie is late arriving back from international duty and the manager drops him. Rangers, just a few weeks after a shoddy performance at Tynecastle, put in a shoddy performance and lose 1-0 and go out of the Cup with a whimper. Rangers don't have any players who are in form at all. It's just a fact. We just don't. We are a mess. The players look utterly bereft of confidence. This is a side that won at Parkhead 2 months earlier. Nobody is playing well. The attackers don't want the ball. The midfielders are letting people run off them constantly. The defence don't know what balls to go for, what balls not to pick up. Nothing is working at all. The team is just completely gone. And that night, famously, Steven Gerrard does an interview in which he says, I'll need to think about the future. Rumours immediately start that he's leaving. Stephen, it's been put to me, and I think it's a cracking point, that obviously COVID will soon bite, but that if we hadn't still been in Europe, would Steven Gerrard have walked? Only he knows. But it's a frightening thought now. But I did think that weekend he's going. I thought he was going.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound silly when I say this, but see, talking about it, I get goosebumps and horrible feelings, that kind of shuddery feeling of remembering that Sunday evening and that aftermath, and immediately turning, to the missus again and saying that he's finished, he's done, and then there being all the rumours, all the talk, again, people on it us, what's going on, and there was a real, again, a vacuum of what was happening. I don't know if Steven Gerrard would have walked. I don't think that's the case. I'm honestly, I don't think he's that kind of person, but I think that he was asking those, probably for the first time in his career as a whole, he was asking himself those questions, and that was enough for me. It wasn't really, I'm certainly a fickle, normal football fan in terms of, get him out, hopeless, blah, blah, blah. I've never really said that with Steven Gerrard, because even and we look back on blogs and stuff, and I've always said we need to stick with this. I believe that there's an outcome. And even in being so mad after that Hearts Cup game and, I forget it, they can all go and I'll bloody drive them wherever you want, blah, blah, blah. And like you said, the players' form had fallen off the cliff. When I heard that, there was a gut-wrenching panic within. If he walks away, Beale, McAllister, everybody, we're back to
they all
square
go.
one.
Yeah, they all go.
Where is the end in sight? Where is, this is just going to keep going round? Because if Steven Gerrard can't do it, who can? And it was just a hopelessly empty feeling. I don't believe he would have walked, David, but I think that night and one coming up was the lowest point, even after the cup final, void of such a disappointment. That was horrible. that Sunday night.
That was my lowest point. I thought,
yeah, I mean,
because we've spoken about this. Personally, I'd invested so much in Steven Gerrard being a success that had he failed, God knows where we go. And who's next? And surely I can't put that much faith in this particular person because I've been burned, by believing in this guy. And it was hellish. And of course, we're going to probably skip by two important victories a wee bit just because of time. And those are the matches against Braga. Fantastic result. The night at Ibrox, the Hadji night, the Joe Aribo goal was absolutely one against a great side. They were terrific. They race into a 2-0 lead, and you're thinking, Jesus, this could be 6 or 7. And then somehow, with the help of the crowd, who are magnificent, we get back in 3-2. Then we go over there and beat them 1-0. But then Ryan Kent famously says, we don't feel under as much pressure in Europe. There's a lot of pressure domestically. And of course, people are going to then go, these guys don't have the mentality to play for Rangers, if they can't handle this. And it's totally understandable. We play Hamilton at home. There's captain's notes in the programme where James Tavernier speaks about that and says something similar. I think we're not giving a lot of secrets away when we say that the captain doesn't go away with a pen and a bit of paper and write these notes at any club. Sorry if you believe that. But we play Hamilton at home, and we're actually, believe it or not, people have said, we're terrible that night. We're really not terrible. We make loads of chances. You just can't score. We could have played all night and not scored. And then Connor Goldson, of all people, now seems odd, but makes another mistake. We lose at home to Hamilton. Rangers should not lose at home to Hamilton ever. But then we've been hearing about this thing called COVID, and the world shuts down, and that's the end of the season. The SFA, of course, are in a rush to award Celtic the title. Now, we'll speak more about what happens in that period, both on and off the pitch. Well, not on the pitch, but off the pitch and with the club next week. But at that point, Stephen, there's a wonderful, wonderful old phrase. The night is darkest before the dawn. And if ever that phrase applied to a situation, it was now. When I was leaving that Hamilton game, and I was devastated. My little dog had died a couple of days before, and I was just, bereft. But the boys from H&H got me, and they said, right, come on out. And, they looked after me. Absolutely brilliant. But after that Hamilton defeat, if you'd told me, by the way, David, you're not going to see Rangers lose another league game before, by next summer. That hasn't happened yet. You're not going to see this Rangers team even concede that often. You're going to see them win every single home match, and you're going to romp to the title next year with the same manager, with mostly the same players, and they're going to be everything that you think they can be. And you're going to win 55 on March the 7th. I would have punched you in the face and said, stop talking shite round me. What has happened from that point to this is a movie script.
A couple of things. The funny thing is, it was exactly a year between Rangers 0, Hamilton 1, and Livingston 0, Rangers 1, which more or less clinched it for, and then it would be a couple of days before we actually sealed it at the weekend. So if you, I met you that night. I don't know if you'll remember this, because
I remember. Obviously, just outside, aye.
Yeah, well, at the sign across the road where we all sort of congregate and stuff like that. And I remember saying to you, David, I think that's it. I think he'll walk. And you said, no. I think you said along the lines of, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, sort of thing. Like, there was a definite resignation amongst all of us that we were at a point where we thought it could happen. But I don't think anybody envisaged, that it would turn out the way it did. Certainly not in the league over the next season, and certainly not to stop and have the. Oh yeah, I mean, I would have got a clip round the ear and slapped off one of the boys in the pod, Big Alex or somebody, who's the eternal optimist. We'd never even have thought that. So
you and I are optimistic people, right? And we sometimes get abuse for it, for being, too optimistic on, social media or pods or your blog or whatever, right? It's not just we'll win the league next year. You can say that, you can be defiant, and you never know. But by the way, this will be one of the best. Well, in terms of points, this will be the best league season you've ever seen. I've ever seen. Yet there was nothing at all that night. The players were gone. I mean, their confidence had gone. They were talking shite about how there was too much pressure. And then now we're sitting here undefeated champions. I mean, this is why we love this sport. This is why we love this club, because you can't, people ask me why I read non-fiction books rather than fiction. This is why. Real life throws up more amazing things than any book.
It's incredible, really. And if you look at the things that were happening at that point, David, in terms of, right, you've got James Tavernier, who is, after those comments, I've said at the time, if he goes, he should go. Captain can't speak like that, etc., etc., or he can't have words like that put to him. Connor Goldson had made a horrendous mistake at Kilmarnock. He made another one at Hamilton. He was at fault at Hearts.
It was.
Is basically his form had fallen off the cliff. Then Niko Katic wasn't performing next to him. So all these wee things that had been good, at that point in time, defensively, midfield was missing. Stephen Davis is he's looking leggy, he's looking tired.
Well, he looked done.
All the things that could have went wrong had went wrong. We weren't scoring. Alfredo, many people after that Hearts game, David, very much like the previous year when he got sent off, I was done. You're ready to drive him down the road, and there's just so much going on that if we look back at this point, this pod that we're doing in reflection and growth, this is going to be quite a sort of negative one, but it's not meaning to be, because this is so important to what happened next, which will obviously come in the next episode, which is going to be, bloody fantastic. I can't wait for that one.
I think it might be a two-parter, genuinely. I think
you're right, because we have to discuss everything that happened in the summer leading to this season, because COVID might have came at a time where it, I'd like to imagine that the players all sat down together and said, forget what's went on, but every single one of you need to focus, need to learn to perform for this badge, perform for this club, because we cannot have this same thing. Because all of a sudden, that Connor Goldson has came back and been Richard Gough, no mistakes, robotic. How can it go? James Tavernier, Captain Courageous, Man of the Season, everything. That's not an exaggeration, David. It's just crazy. It's went from one extreme to the absolute other, and we'll need to dissect how it got there. But this was definitely, in terms of Gerrard, Rangers, where we were, this is definitely the most difficult period. But not only was it the most difficult, like you say, the change is just so instant. It's difficult. I'm struggling to put it into words, because we've went from being in such a bad place to doing what we've done now, David, and that, I wouldn't be surprised if it's two parts. Not only because this season deserves to have a definite scrutiny as well and adulation, because they've been sensational, but we'll need to try, me and you, to eloquently get to the point of how have they managed it, because I'm not sure we can.
Yeah, it's going to be fun trying.
Yes, absolutely.
But no promises that we'll get to the bottom of it. But
we might not get the answers, but we'll have a good time discussing.
We'll have a good time discussing the questions, absolutely. And just as you say that, this show's brought back a few emotions for you. It's brought back a few emotions for me. I hope for the listeners. But next week, even just thinking about it now, getting the feelings. But yeah, probably be a two-parter, folks. We'll see how it goes. That's a good thing about Stevie and I being our own bosses when it comes to this kind of stuff. That we set the rules. So, Stephen, it's been, I don't know, a pleasure, but cathartic. Would that be the word?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, in order to get to where we want to be, even in this episode sort of, series that we're doing, we had to cover this as in depth as we can. And I hope that, the feedback's been great, David. I'm so enthusiastic about how people have been saying, about the series and what we're doing. I'm really glad, because if people didn't listen, it would just be us having a chat. So it's been great. And I hope that people, will enjoy this and take it for what it adds. A wee bit of therapeutic kind of discussion, because what happens next is why we're doing this, basically. And there's a lot more to come and discuss. And if people, if people want us to mention certain things and talk about or discuss, they should definitely come in the comments, and we can go from there as well. It's really exciting where we are in terms of the series to look on. I'm really excited about talking about this championship winning team, and talking about not only that, but in terms of where we go next, because this isn't the end. It's only the beginning.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week, folks. Until then, stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.